Hey everybody, I hope you're doing good and that you had a great weekend. I want to start out with a little bit of a organizational update. I posted a little bit of information on our Google Classroom about this, organizational trick that I have figured out. And I think y'all know that I love everything being organized and in one place and ready to go. But what I have done is posted this, or it'll post tomorrow morning at 8. This is Sunday night, so it's there for you now. But anyway, this is on our stream on the Google Classroom, and it has a link to a weekly plan. And this will be a trial run. We'll figure out if it's going to work and if we like it. But I think it fits better with what we have done in the classroom prior to being out. And it looks a lot like the unit plans that I already passed out. And so if you go to the unit plan, it'll look like this, and it'll have some links to note outline pages. There will eventually be a link to the video that I am currently recording, and then there will be a link to review worksheets, the key to the worksheet, and then if you want to push yourself, and I have kind of a harder worksheet or a challenging worksheet, I will put that on there as well. But when you click on this, it will send you to a Google Doc that I have saved, and this is the note page that we'll be filling out today. It was in your packet, so you've already got it, but if you've lost it or need to print it, then it's there, or if you mess up and you want to rewrite it, print it, you can do it again. And then for the review sheet, you can do the same thing. I have posted the review sheet. You can write your answers to it on a piece of paper, and then check yourself with the key that's already there. Okay, so I think this will work really well. As long as I have done the sharing properties correctly, you should be able to get everything. If I haven't, then please let me know, because sometimes I don't know how things look on your end. This is very similar to what we would have had on our unit plan in the classroom, but everything is just interactive now, which I really like. And then it'll update automatically. So I haven't made the quiz for Tuesday yet. When I do, then I'll just scan this in and link it to the words cardiac cycle and cardiac conduction. And then on Tuesday, you'll be able to click on it and take the quiz. It's a little bit more uniform and clean than everything being under the classwork tab, and then you have to remember which one I'm looking for and scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. So hopefully it will really streamline everything. But again, if something's not working, then just give me a shout and we'll figure it out together. All right, so for the notes today, you will need 5 colors, and you will need your note sheet on blood vessels. It should be the only one that is left in your heart section. You should have another section of your packet for the nervous system, which we will eventually get to. So you'll need 5 colors for this, and it's all about blood vessels, blood vessel types, and then blood vessel structure, and how the 3 types that we're going to talk about differ from one another. Now on the screen here, I have 3 pictures from Body Worlds, and Body Worlds is an amazing exhibit that shows you not live, shows you in real life plastinated humans who have donated their bodies to science, and in specific body parts, they can show you like the blood vessels of the heart, or they can show you the syndesmosis between a radius and an ulna, or tibia and fibula that I showed y'all previously in class. But these are 3 different structures of the body that the workers from Body Worlds have dissected down to just the blood vessels. And I think I take for granted how many blood vessels we have, and all of the branches of them are probably not named, but they do have to oxygenate all of the tissue. So it is not just one blood vessel supplying the entire heart. It is not just a handful of blood vessels supplying the arm, they're going to branch and branch and branch until they get into these smaller vessels that can fully oxygenate and perfuse that oxygen into the tissues of body parts. So here we have a heart, and this is no tissue. Okay, we don't have any myocardial tissue here in this image. It is only blood vessels of the heart. We've got the aorta at the top. You've got a big branch of a coronary artery here. But the rest of these tiny vessels that look almost like a spider web that would wrap around the heart are the remaining blood vessels that would supply that myocardium with oxygenation and return that deoxygenated blood back to the heart. Same thing is true here with the arm. I mean, it looks like an arm. It looks like you just skinned it and you're looking at the meat or the muscle of the arm. But no, the muscle is gone. Skeletal muscle is gone. The bones are gone. Everything that you see here is just these big branches off of the top of these arteries and blood vessels at the proximal end of the arm, and how they get smaller and smaller and smaller as they go down and really make this network of blood vessels of the arm. And the same thing would be true here in the face. I mean, it looks like the structure of the head. It looks like our head, and that's how many blood vessels there are in just 3 parts of your body. All right, so you don't have this image, but I do want to just touch on it for a second. Blood vessels are all connected to one another. Right? There is no just rando blood vessel in your arm, for example, that would just end. They are all interconnected to supply the oxygen to the tissues through the very tiny capillaries that we have, and then return that deoxygenated blood back to the heart through veins. So large arteries, okay, your aorta, and this is what it looks like. Okay, that's an accurate size of an average aorta, and that aorta is going to branch off of the heart. And not every blood vessel, not every artery is going to be that big. This is carrying oxygenated blood. Those large arteries are going to become medium arteries. Then they're going to become smaller arteries until we get to what we've called in class baby arteries. And those are arterioles. The arterioles are carrying oxygenated blood into this side of the capillary network, into the oxygenated side of a capillary bed, of a capillary network. Now, this is microscopic. So on this image here, you see a microscope, which means, duh, okay, microscopic, you would not be able to see it, but that has to make sense. Okay, in order to diffuse oxygen into the tissue, I need the smallest blood vessel possible. And that smallest blood vessel is called a capillary. Capillary is made of nothing but simple squamous epithelium, a tiny simple squamous cell next door to another simple squamous cell, next door to another simple squamous cell. Okay, they're just one single layer of scale-shaped cells that will allow that diffusion and that profusion of oxygen into the tissue. Now, on the venous side or the vein side of the capillary, we're going to start to push and get back towards the heart. So the deoxygenated blood will be carried into smaller venules, which then go into medium veins, which then goes into large veins like superior and inferior vena cava. And now those are called capacitants or reservoir vessels. At any given time in your body, about 60% of your blood is found in these large veins, in the capacitants and reservoir vessels. Okay, meaning that the remaining 40% is kind of zooming down this water slide through the arteries, delivering that oxygen, and then we lazy river it back 60% of the volume back to the heart. Okay, now that process is kind of hard for me to wrap my brain around, that at any time, 60% of my blood, and you've got roughly 5 liters of blood, 60% of that's sitting in the veins. So it takes a little bit of time to get that blood back up to the heart. Doesn't take nearly the amount of time to send it away from the heart. So what might that mean about the anatomy of the artery in comparison to the anatomy of the vein? All right, if I'm zooming it out of the heart, I'm sending it away from the heart, then it's got to have some extra oomph and some extra layers to be under that pressure and withstand that pressure. Whereas the vein is the lazy river. Okay, not that it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But it doesn't have to have those extra layers inside of it to be under the pressure of the, of the movement per se, of the tension, of the amount of pressure in that vessel to get the blood away from the heart. Alrighty, so let's look at what you actually have in your packet. So we're going to start with, let's start with capillaries. Okay, capillaries are often called capillary beds. I probably refer to capillary networks. They are your smallest microscopic blood vessels that will allow for gas exchange. Now, in this chart, we're going to look at what layers are found in each of the vessel types. What's the purpose of the vessel? Okay, just big idea in comparison of the job of a capillary versus an artery versus a vein. We're going to look at the lumen, the hole inside that vessel, and then we're going to see, are there valves present? And we'll talk about the purpose and function of those valves in a second. Now, capillaries, again, they are tiny microscopic blood vessels that will allow for gas exchange. In order for that gas exchange to happen, I don't want 50 layers of cells. I want one single layer of simple squamous epithelium. Why? Because your body's going to work smarter, not harder. It would be super hard and expend more energy to get that oxygen across 100 cells than it would just to plop it over one simple squamous epithelial cell. So that structure is leading to the function of that capillary. The function of the capillary is gas exchange along with nutrient exchange, along with waste exchange. It is allowing for that movement of any of these things, nutrients, waste, and gases across the simple squamous epithelial wall of that capillary. The name for that epithelial wall is endothelium. It is a specific term given to the innermost lining of a vessel or the entire wall of the capillary. Now, the lumen shape is round. Okay, it just has a round opening in comparison to others that we'll look at in a second. And it does not have valves. Doesn't have room for valves because it's only one simple squamous layer thick. Now, again, the name for that simple squamous epithelium of the capillary is endothelium. Endo means within. Now, we will see in a second that that endothelium serves as like a building block for an artery and a vein. But because a capillary has to be so tiny and has to be so thin to allow for this exchange, it is the only layer of the capillary. So I'm going to color it in and try to do the best I can with my mouse here. Okay, I'm just going to pick one color. It doesn't matter which of your 5 you're using. It's just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to color in my word endothelium. Now, I'm also going to come over here and color everything that is endothelial tissue of this capillary. And this endothelial tissue is the only layer of a capillary. It makes up the wall of the capillary, and it actually is only big enough for one red blood cell to travel at a time. So if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that there is only one red blood cell, only one erythrocyte that can fit through this capillary at a time. We cannot surge a lot of blood volume through that capillary at a time. We're down to the cellular level in this picture, or in every capillary. And you can see that the shape of these cells is squamous. It is a scale-shaped cell, one layer thick, wrapped into a tube, making up the wall of that capillary. But it also makes up the inner linings, the innermost layer of a vein and an artery. So I'm going to use the same color and make the innermost lining of the artery in this picture. Oops. And the vein in this picture. Okay, so if you need to pause for a second and color this in, you can, but I'm going to color in the simple squamous epithelium of the vein and the artery. It makes up the innermost lining of these two vessels. And it is still called endothelium, and it is still simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so be careful with the wording here. I know it's a little bit tricky with endo and epi, but it's just, again, that specific term, specific term given to that simple squamous epithelium of your blood vessels. Okay, so now let's move to a vein. Okay, because with an artery, we really just build on a vein. When we look at veins, you should already know the purpose of the vein. The vein is to bring blood, or is used to bring blood back towards the heart. All of that deoxygenated blood is getting back to the heart slowly, 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 like the lazy river that we talked about a second ago. 60% of our blood volume is just going to sit in that vein and be pumped back towards the heart when it slowly and as it gets from the small venules through the medium veins to the large veins like the superior and inferior vena cava. So the main purpose is to transport blood towards the heart, and there are only 3 layers to the vein. And because there are only 3 layers, it does not have the ability to stand open all of the time. It doesn't have the oomph and the added layers to always stay open in a round shape. It's kind of flabby, and therefore the lumen gets smushed a little, and that lumen shape changes from a round lumen in a capillary and an artery to an oval shape. So it just collapses down a bit in a vein. And again, that's just because it's got 3 layers in comparison to the artery, which we'll see in a second, has 5. And those added layers give it the ability to be open all the time. And again, the lumen is the opening inside of the blood vessel. Okay, it is the hole inside a swim noodle. It is the inner section of a tube. We talked about lumen when we did, simple columnar epithelium, and when we talked about the lumen of the intestine and how that was the space or the hole that food would travel through. And veins do have valves, and it is different than a tricuspid valve and a semilunar valve that you've looked at in the heart. It does have a semilunar shape. Okay, it has 2 semilunar cups, unlike the heart that has semilunar valves, which are 3 cups, and they look like that Mercedes sign. In the vein, those 2 semilunar cups are half moon, therefore they're called semilunar, but they're going to allow for travel of blood back towards the heart. and I think about it a lot as I think about teaching and standing all day long. If I'm standing, my veins are under a lot of stress because I have to pump blood from my big toe all the way back to my heart. And if gravity's taking a hold of that blood, the purpose of that valve is to give yourself little checkpoints, or give yourself little stopping points to where when muscles contract around those veins, if you wiggle your toes or walk around, the muscles around the veins will squeeze and contract and will push blood a little bit further back towards your heart. Well, instead of them, or instead of the blood falling all the way back down when gravity takes a hold of it again, or when those muscles aren't contracted, the valves will hold it in place. So it's like a swinging door. When I contract my leg muscles and walk around, the blood goes a little bit further and the swinging door catches it, and then the door shuts and that blood falls back on the door. And then you move again and it goes a little bit further and it swings back on the next door. And again, it swings back on the next door. So the purpose of those valves is to hold the blood at certain intervals in those veins to get the blood back towards the heart. Next couple days, we'll talk about varicose veins and what that means for the faulty anatomy of those valves. But the valves are there in order to help that blood get back towards the heart, so they're not always fighting against gravity in our bodies. The name for these three layers of a vein are first the endothelium, and the endothelium is that simple squamous epithelium of a blood vessel. And we will now add our second color, and it is smooth muscle. Okay, smooth muscle is the third type of muscle that we haven't really talked about yet. We've done a lot on skeletal muscle and we've done a lot on cardiac muscle, but smooth muscle was the third type. They were spindle shaped, mononucleated, non-striated, and they were found in the blood vessels and hollow organs. They're what cause food to move through your digestive system through peristalsis. Same thing would be true in the blood vessel structure. Smooth muscle will allow for some movement and constriction of vessels. Okay, we talked about vasoconstriction before. We've talked about vasodilation when we did inflammation, and we had a brief vasoconstriction, then vasodilation. This is what's causing that. A smooth muscle contraction causing vasoconstriction, smooth muscle relaxation causing that vasodilation in a vessel. Vaso means vessel. Now you've got it in the vein and you have it in the artery. Okay, so this smooth muscle is found in both of those types. And then to keep the vessels where they are, to keep the veins and arteries kind of situated in your body, has some fibrous connective tissue on the outside. It's protective. It helps prevent a lot of damage to that vessel wall. And so the fibrous connective tissue, again, is the outermost layer of the blood vessel. And it is also found on the artery. So we'll color it in on both vessels. Here on the artery and then on the vein as well. This makes up your three layers of the vein. We have endothelium, fibrous connective tissue, and smooth muscle in the middle. And again, the purpose of that vein is to get the blood back towards the heart. All we're going to do for an artery is add in two layers. We're going to add in two elastic layers that will allow for stretch and recoil as the artery is under so much pressure from ventricular contraction. Okay, when the ventricle is contracting, when you are undergoing ventricular systole, you are pushing blood away from the heart through this artery. And that pressure will cause stress on the walls of that vessel. So arteries are made with two added elastic layers to allow for this pressure, to allow for this constant stress that you can, that the artery would have. You can also feel it in your neck, most commonly, or on your wrist to check your pulse. When you're checking pulse or feeling for pulse, you are feeling the stretch and recoil. You're feeling the vasoconstriction and dilation of an artery. You can't really feel it as much in a vein because they don't have these added two elastic layers and they're not under as much stress as the heart is pumping blood away from the body. But that pulse that you feel under your skin is in an artery, not in a vein, because of these added layers. So there are 5 compared to 3 in the vein. The purpose of that artery is to transport blood away from the heart. Remember, A artery, A away. The lumen is round. Because we have the 2 added elastic layers, it holds the artery lumen open all of the time. It holds it in this round position as opposed to the vein, which has an oval shape because it collapses down just a little bit. And then are there valves? No. Okay, and sometimes students give me pushback on this because they'll say, well, there's a semilunar valve on the entrance to the pulmonary artery and the entrance to the aorta, and both of those are arteries. Yes, I agree. There are semilunar valves in the heart. There are not semilunar valves in the pulmonary trunk or in the aorta. The valves are before you get to that. They are technically part of the heart, not the vessel. They just allow blood into the vessel. Looking systemically across your whole body, there are no valves found within arteries. So we have to put no in this case. The 2 elastic layers found within the arteries are an internal elastic layer. Change color. Internal elastic layer, and that one is more internal. So it's going to be closer to your endothelium. There we go. And an external elastic layer. Now, in your textbook and in most textbooks, they're called internal elastic laminas. Lamin means sheet or layer. And so your internal one is going to be closer to that endothelium. If I were proper all of the time, I would always call it a lamina, but most of the time I default to sheet or layer just because I think about this as being 5 or 3 or 1 layer that's all stacked on top of one another. And this is what my lightsaber is in class. So if you have played with it at all, it'll pull out and have 5 layers. And then that's your artery. And all you'd have to do is push in the internal and external elastic laminas to make it a vein. So all you do on a vein is get rid of those 2 elastic layers, which is why I like that organ model so much. All right, so that gets us through vessel structure. And just a summary of the differences between the 3 types of blood vessels. And again, these are all connected to one another. If you look at this very simplistic picture over on the right, an artery carries the blood away from the heart. And these capillary beds and capillary networks would be inside the tissues where the movement of nutrients and gas and waste can happen, where the diffusion through the endothelium or simple squamous epithelium can occur. And the deoxygenated blood is going to come back to the veins. And this is a good image of the vein because you can see these 2 semilunar valves inside the vein that again would serve as just a swinging door to catch that blood as it moves back towards the heart, and it takes a little bit of pressure excuse me, pressure off of the heart and the vein to return all of that blood back. I'll have the review sheet is posted for you to look over, and then the key is right underneath for you to check yourself. I will be working through your review sheets from Friday and providing you some feedback on that. So be on the lookout for those notes to pop up as I get through them and return them back to you. And then if you have any other issues, let me know. This planner will update as I do it. So right now it's looking like cardio tests on Monday, the 27th. Yep. And if we have to wiggle around, we can. This is just kind of tentative, but again, it will change as necessary and will always be linked on Google Classroom. You need a little pep talk. I have posted a little pep talk video if you're needing some encouragement. It is Kid President, but the updated version. So it reminded me of y'all because it looks like he's graduating from high school or at least growing up from the Kid President video that I normally watch. So 4 minutes of cheer and of joy. So I recommend you take a look at that if you're feeling a little down or you need a happy Monday video. So hope everybody's doing okay and let me know if you need anything.